Fantastic, thank you. Okay, that's great. Thank you, everybody. And this is our session number 7. So, and we are now looking at focus on form. And we will see that I think this is a very interesting session, and it's also the most complicated session that we're going to be looking at. Okay, so I don't know if you remember last week's session. It was about my childhood holidays, okay? And I asked you for 15 minutes. You were not IUG English language trainees. You were not training to be English language teachers. For 15 minutes, you became language learners. You were my students. So here are 3 questions to see if you can remember last week's lesson. Question number 1, what structures was I trying to teach? Question number 2, why did I start with the present tense, my holidays every summer, and then move to the past, my childhood holidays? And then question number 3, how did I get you to notice the target language? So I think, Takwa, you have your hand up for the first question. What structures was I trying to teach, Takwa?
Implicit knowledge and explicit knowledge.
No, you are thinking about yourself as an English language trainee teacher, but I want you to think about the actual English lesson that I gave you. Remember, I asked you to pretend to be a real student, and I taught you some grammar. I taught you some grammar last week, but what was the grammar that I tried to teach you? Mice, do you remember?
I think the differences between used to and would.
Exactly. Okay, so that was the 15 minutes when I was asking you to pretend to be a learner of English. Okay. So the second question was, in my little used to and would lesson, I started with the present tense, my holidays every summer, and then I moved to the past tense, my childhood holidays. Why did I do this? Seems like a waste of time. Mice.
Because the present tense is easier than the past tense. So when you said so that we are understanding the present tense, then you move to the past tense.
Good. A very good answer, Mice. Because it would be crazy for me to teach you used to and would, which is very difficult, if you can't do something easy, like the present tense. Excellent. And the third question is the most difficult question. How did I get you to notice the target language? I will help you. Did you see the target language, or did you hear the target language first? Maybe it's difficult to remember. No? Well, last week I gave you a very short text to read about my childhood holidays. So I asked you some questions. For example, what time did I get up? How did I travel on holiday? Did I enjoy it? And then to get the answers, I gave you a little text to get you to see used to and would. So you did some reading. Okay. Okay, so the answers here are: what structures was I trying to teach? Used to versus would. Why did I start with the present tense? Answer: start by checking that students know the easy stuff. And then how did I get you to notice the target language? By reading a short text about my childhood holidays. Okay, so today we will refer a little bit to my used to and would lesson. And to prepare for this week, I asked you to read Ellis's principle number 3. Instruction needs to ensure that learners also focus on form. Okay, that's what we're talking about today. Okay. Now, here are some questions about our used to and would lesson last week. So, starting on page 213 from Ellis, he says, instruction can cater. He makes some specific points about how to different ways to focus on form. And he says, let's read this together. Ellis says teachers can focus on form in grammar lessons via an inductive or a deductive approach. And these are Ellis's words. An inductive approach to grammar teaching is designed to encourage noticing of pre-selected forms. A deductive approach seeks to establish an awareness of the grammatical rule. So last week, I taught you a specific grammatical feature, but was my lesson an inductive approach or a deductive approach? Takwa, you have your hand up.
I think the method is deductive
So,
because you focused on teaching us the rule through activities, allowing us to deduce the rule.
okay, now this is interesting because it's a very difficult word, deductive, because you're right. The word deduce means to work out the rule for yourself. But when we talk about inductive or deductive, it's actually the opposite. Excuse me. Inductive is when you ask the students to work out the rule for themselves, and deductive is when the teacher is in the center giving the rule to the student. So what I did was I tried to do the first. Okay, I tried to let you work out the rules for yourself, and that would be an inductive approach. And I know, Takwa, the word deductive is confusing, okay, but this is how I did it. Okay, I asked you to think. We could say you would get up early. Can I change would to used to? You used to get up early. Yes. And then I said, you used to live in London. Can I change used to would? No. And I asked you why. Talk in pairs. And then we had this slide. And this was very useful to help you work out the rules. Do you remember the rules from last week? What does this slide show us? Mice.
The differences between action verbs and state verbs.
Good answer, Mice. Which of these are action verbs, Mice?
I think to go, to get excited, to get up, and to take a bus.
That's right. Okay. So I was trying to do an inductive approach, which, as Takwa says, means asking students to work things out for themselves, okay? And some of you were able to work this out for yourselves. Yeah, good. So last week I taught you a specific grammar feature, and my approach was inductive mainly. You work the rules out for yourselves. Okay. Let's look at another way. This is something you read for homework. Ellis has a second way that teachers can focus on form in grammar lessons. The second way is teachers can give tasks that require learners to comprehend and process specific grammatical structures in the input and or to produce the structures in the performance of a task. In the performance of the task. Again, Ellis says that teachers can focus on forming grammar lessons in another way, via tasks that require learners to comprehend and process specific grammatical structures in the input and or to produce the structures in the performance of the task. So here's a question for you. I gave you a focused task, but did the task require you to comprehend and process specific grammatical structures in the input, or instead to produce the structures? So what were you doing? Were you receiving input, or were you producing these new structures? Hi Wafa, hi Bara. We have lots of, hi Zaina, Asil. It's good to see you all joining us. We're talking about last week's lesson. So my question is, did the task require, I gave you a focus task, did the task require you to comprehend and process specific grammatical structures in the input, or instead to produce the structures? Who can answer that? Takwa, you have your hand up.
I think comprehend and process specific grammatical structures in the input.
Well done. Yes, you, as I said, you read a short text about my childhood holidays. So it was a focused task, and in my case, you were receiving the new grammar in the input. I was not asking you to produce the structures. Thank you, Takwa. So the answer is the former. There was no production by you, the learners, last week. And Ellis, he has a third way, number 3, a third way that teachers can focus on form in grammar lessons. And he says teachers can choose methodological options that induce attention to form in the context of producing performing a task. So teachers can focus on form in a task. They can provide time for planning, or they can give corrective feedback. Okay, so let's look at that. So here's a question. How could provision of time for planning or corrective feedback both help students pay attention to form? Now this is a tricky question. Let's think again. How could provision of time for planning or corrective feedback both help students pay attention to form. So we've got two things that teachers can do: provision of time for planning for the students, or corrective feedback. How could these, you can choose, you can tell me about one or the other. I don't mind. So, oh, hi Rose, nice to have you with us. Okay. Can I choose somebody to answer? Takwa, I'm happy that you have your hand up, but it would be nice to hear Amal. What do you think? You can tell me about provision of time for planning, or you can tell me about corrective feedback. Amal.
Okay, I will tell the both, the important for the both.
Mhm.
For a planning time, that allowing time for planning helps learner process and focus on accurate grammatical usage, and this enables them to plan their output carefully and consider the grammatical forms they will use. And
Nice.
about corrective feedback, this draw attention to errors and help learners refine their understanding of a specific structure and notes the gap between their current usage, and this led to improvement.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you, Amal. Yes, both of these. Okay. That very good answer. Thank you. So, Amal, you're right, but it's a tricky question. So, I think we need to go a little bit deeper into it. And we need to go back to something that Ellis wrote when he was defining, he gives, excuse me, we've talked about different ways, 3 different ways to teach form. But what makes this more complicated is that Ellis also gives 3 different definitions of the word form. And this is paragraph 2. So let's take 3 minutes to reread this paragraph 2. We're talking here about definitions of form. This is his first definition of form. Read this. First, form might refer to a general orientation to language, as form. Schmidt dismisses this global attention hypothesis, arguing that learners need to attend to specific forms. So here, I think that Ellis is, he says, this is not helpful, he says. The idea that all language is form is not helpful to teachers. Okay, we are teachers. We need something more specific. Okay, so he says, forget about this first definition. Let's look at the second definition. He says, second, form might be taken to suggest that learners need to attend means listen, pay attention to. Let's start again. Second, form might be taken to suggest that learners need to pay attention only to the graphic, that's the written, or the phonetic instantiations of linguistic forms. Instantiations means production. However, theorists such as Schmidt and Long are insistent that focus on form refers to form-function mapping, i.e. the correlation between a particular form and the meanings it realizes in communication. So, that's the second possible definition of form. And this is the third one. Just take a second to read it quietly. So the third definition of form is focus on form might be assumed to refer to awareness of some underlying abstract rule. Schmidt, however, is careful to argue that attention to form refers to the noticing of specific linguistic items as they occur in the input to which learners are exposed, not to an awareness of grammatical rules. So 3 definitions. Definition number 1 is a summary. All language is form. Ellis says, we can dismiss this. I agree. It's not useful. This is not useful to teachers like me and you and Nazmi. Maybe it's useful to theorists of language, but not to teachers. Definition number 2. Form equals graphic, phonetic instantiations. Instantiations means examples, visible example. So definition number 2. Form equals graphic or phonetic visible examples, instantiation. And this is the way I usually continue my used to and would lesson. I continue after I teach the meaning. Remember, state versus action verbs. Then I go on to talk about graphic instantiations, that is, the way we write the structures. This is my lesson. I'm continuing my lesson from last week. So this is, imagine again, you are my language students. So we have this used to structure. So we are talking about how to write it. What's the first word? How could we describe the first word? Can anyone tell me? How can we describe the first word if we're talking about? Good. Ruz?
No, taqwa.
Taqwa? What is the first word? Did you? I think I heard you say it.
Subject.
Good. It's the
That's it.
subject. And then we have used to, subject plus used to. And then what is the next word? Subject.
The verb. It's a big form verb.
Good. Excellent. It's the base form of the verb. So subject plus used to plus the base form of the verb. So here I am talking about graphic instantiations, the way we write the affirmative. Let's continue. Did you used to live in London? How do we produce the question form, the interrogative? Oh, how do we, there's a mistake here. Oh,
Yes,
dear.
it's supposed to be used to without the ed.
Well done. Okay, so how do we make it? Did plus subject plus used to plus the base form of the verb. Okay. Excuse me. When I taught this lesson to my students last week, 2 weeks ago, they never saw the problem with did you used to, okay? Because your grammar is much better than British students' grammar. Do you believe me?
Actually, yes. Actually, I teach students at home. I have some students that I teach, and I give them grammar. So I know that all the mistakes that they have.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting because you, in my experience, I don't know if Nazmi agrees with me, but often the best English language teachers, the best foreign language teachers are teachers who have learnt the language, excuse me, as a second language. Why do you think that is? Why is it possible that you will be better English language teachers than my students in my university? The answer is because Roos?
Because we learn English as a grammar and most important rules of English, but for the native English speakers, they don't learn the rule. They don't care about the rules, but they care about how to give the idea or give their opinion about anything.
Good answer. Yeah, that's right. That's why often people like yourselves or Nazmi, you may be better English language teachers than my students. It's possible that I will be a better Italian teacher than my wife, for the same reason that I have learned Italian as a student. Yeah, let's continue. So here we have the interrogative form, did plus subject plus used to plus the base form of the verb. Good. And then I do the same for the negative and the same analysis of graphic instantiation of would. And in my used to and would lesson, normally I move on to look next at the phonetic instantiations of used to and would. What do you think this means? The phonetic instantiations. I will choose one of you. I will choose one of you. So let me see. Oh, hi, Rachad. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see you. Esra, what do you think it means to look at the phonetic instantiations? Esra.
I think it's about focusing on the phonetics.
Yeah. And yeah. So basically.
So it's about spelling and how to read the words.
Yeah, it's how to say the words, how to read them aloud.
Pronounce them. Yeah.
Right, pronounce. Yeah. So it means drilling. It means that you have to get the students to pronounce the words. So normally my lesson starts with meaning, you know, the state and action difference that we did last week. And then I look at the graphic instantiation, how to write it, the grammar. And then finally, I look at how to pronounce it with the students. I didn't have time last week to do all of that. So now, so when we look at the three possible definitions of form, we've come to definition number 3 was the noticing of specific linguistic items as they occur in the input to which learners are exposed. And I think this is what I did in my used to and would lesson last week. So but the problem for me is that I was looking at meaning, I think, not at form. Okay, in my lesson last week, when I was looking at the difference between state verbs and action verbs, I was looking at meaning, not at form. So I've got a problem, everybody. There is something here which Ellis says, which is not clear to me. It seems to me that when he talks about his definition 3, okay, he's talking about form, but I'm talking about meaning. Now, this is confusing, but I'm not worried because next, in 2 weeks' time, in the last lesson, we are meeting Professor Ellis. So we can ask him to explain. We are very, very lucky, okay? As Nazmi knows, Professor Ellis is a very, very big fish, okay? And he has agreed to meet us. So anything that I'm not clear about, I will ask him. And anything that you are not clear about, you can ask him. Takwa, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I want to say that difference between form and meaning, but in both, I think the form help to understand the meaning of the sentence or word. For example, there are poems in which the form helps to understand the meaning.
Can you
Yes.
think of an example, Takwa? I know it's
There are poems in which the form help us to understand the meaning.
Well, I agree. I think that's an interesting comment. I think it's sometimes very difficult to separate form and meaning, okay? And they support each other. I agree, Takwa. I think your point is a very good one. But I want you to start to think today about questions that you would like to ask Professor Ellis. Okay, so this is a question that I would be interested in asking him myself. Okay, all right. And Nazmi, I don't know if you would like to think of a question for Professor Ellis. I remember, Nazmi, you said you first read his work 30 years ago. So maybe you've been thinking of questions for him for 30 years. Yeah, you can think of maybe about a question to ask him. Okay. Okay. Now, the homework task also said that teachers can focus on form in the classroom. So, via methodological options that induce attention to form in the context of performing a task. Okay, and somebody gave us a very good answer to what this means, the provision of time for planning and corrective feedback. Who was it who gave this fantastic answer to? I can't remember. Let me look. One of you gave a very good answer to this. Okay. My question at the bottom, how could provision of time for planning and corrective feedback both help students pay attention to form? Takwa, was it you who gave the answer?
No, but I can answer.
Go on.
Giving students time to plan helps them think carefully and use grammar correctly during tasks. Corrective feedback, on the other hand, points out their mistake and help them fix them just.
Yeah, okay. I think maybe that's a good answer again. Very good answer. I think maybe Amal also gave this answer earlier in the lesson. Okay, let's look at the value of corrective feedback. So in my opinion, corrective feedback is always useful for any of our 3 definitions of form. Now, corrective feedback is closely linked to TBL. Do you know what TBL stands for? Does anybody know what is TBL? Let me choose. Rose, do you know what TBL stands for? No?
Is it about task-based learning?
Excellent, that's correct. Yes, was that you, Esther? Yeah, task-based learning, correct. Okay, good.
Yes.
We did a task-based learning activity earlier in the course. I don't know. Do you remember when I gave you a task to do? We did an example. And I put you into some groups. Do you remember when I put you into groups and we did a very silly but fun activity? Does anybody remember?
You told us to sell parrots.
Exactly. Well done. Yes, I divided you into 3 groups. One of you were the wives and you wanted to buy a cat. One of you were the husbands, you wanted to buy a dog. And one of you were the pet shop owners and you wanted to sell your parrot. Okay, so in the activity, I set up the task, but did I give you any grammar input before the task? Did I teach you any forms before we did the pet shop activity?
No, you didn't.
Exactly. It was just, I gave you a task, I asked you to do it, and after the task, I could do some corrective feedback if I wanted with your mistakes. So I'm going to show you another example of task-based learning, which I love to do with my students, and they are here in the middle. These are my students in the middle, and they are all engineering students. So let's have a look at these. I give them some materials, okay? So I give my students some real materials. On the top left, what can you see? Top left. Just shout out if you know what you can see. What do you see? Top left. Over here. What can you see? Oh, in the picture. Anyone? Top left is some string. And at the top, what can you see? What can you see in the top? Some tape. Okay. On the right, the pink thing is a ping pong ball. So we have string on the left. Tape, a ping pong ball. Under the ping pong ball, the pink ping pong ball, what can you see?
Table.
Good. Under the table, what can you see?
Papers.
Paper. Next to the paper, what can you see? That's a difficult one.
String.
It's not string. No, it's maybe the picture is not clear. It's we call them elastic bands. Okay? Or rubber bands. Next to the rubber bands, what can you see? That's difficult if you haven't been to my country, but can you see the picture of the swan? What do you think that box is?
A group of boys.
No, under the boys. Next to the elastic bands, what can you see?
Matchsticks.
Well done. I think Amna. These are matches. These are matches for lighting a cigarette, for example, or lighting your gas stove. And then we have a table. So let's look again. We have string, top left, tape at the top, a ping pong ball, a table, some paper, some elastic bands, some matches, and another table. Okay. And in the middle, we have some engineers. They want to learn English. They are from They're from Egypt and France and Brazil and China. And they want to learn English to be better engineers. So how do you think I could use all of these materials that you can see to give the students a task? What could I ask these engineering students to do?
Making a
Maybe-
bridge, I think.
Fantastic. That's it. I say to them, make a bridge. Oh, but making a bridge, does that involve any speaking? So I give them the task. I say to them, make a bridge. But how do where is the production of language when they are making the bridge? Can you think, when will they need to produce some English language? Any ideas? Nice.
Maybe
Miss-
if you put them in a group so they can work together and communicate to each other, so they practice the language.
Fantastic. Okay, so perfect answer. You put them in groups. Yes. So let's imagine 5 different groups of 4 students, 20 total. Yes. So 5 different groups producing 5 different bridges. So so that will be lots of speaking, as Mais said, and lots of listening. So that will be useful. Can you think, what about reading or writing? Oh, so we've got speaking and listening with Mais's idea. We put them in groups to make a bridge. But what about speaking? Excuse me. What about reading and writing? How could they practice reading and writing? Any ideas?
Writing the steps of building the bridge.
Say that again.
Writing the steps of building a bridge.
Good. Okay, so they can write the steps of building a bridge. And what about reading? What could they read?
Maybe they have to search and read a lot about this thing.
Yeah, they search on the internet, they go to the library, and they read journals about building a bridge. Okay, so the task involves speaking and listening. So they are planning the construction, they are doing the construction itself, and then they are critiquing the other team's efforts. My bridge, our bridge is better than your bridge. Your bridge is ugly. Your bridge is too expensive. You understand? Critiquing. And maybe you could have grammar. You could have a focus on perhaps comparatives or superlatives. Our bridge is the most beautiful, for example. You could teach your students vocabulary, bridge-related vocabulary. So there are lots of words that I don't know about building bridges, and Nazmi doesn't know about building bridges, and you don't know about building bridges. But for engineers, these words are important. So we can teach some bridge-related vocabulary. We could do some reading, as Mais says, including some genre work. Genre, every type of writing is different. So, for example, one genre is writing engineering reports. So I am not good at writing engineering reports. Okay. Another, because I don't have experience. But engineers need to learn this genre. Another genre is advertising. I am not good at writing advertising, but for an advertising student, this would be important. Okay, so you could do some genre work. For example, read some journal articles on bridge building. And as Mai said, you could do some writing. The students could write reports. So this lesson, just with these materials, string, tape, ping pong ball, tables, paper, elastic bands, matches, this lesson could easily embrace 4 to 5 hours work. It's fantastic, okay? And in this lesson, the learners try to do the task. They learn a lot during the task from each other, but mainly they learn after the task from the corrective feedback that the teacher provides, okay? And by comparing their output with the output of experts. So while the students are talking together to plan their bridges, what do you think the teacher is doing? So we have 4 or 5 groups of students talking together, planning their bridge, and maybe disagreeing. What do you think the teacher is doing while the students are talking together and planning their bridges? Let me choose. Okay, nice. What do you think?
And maybe the teacher see each group and give them instructions to make a better bridge.
Maybe, nice, but I disagree. I think there is something, because remember, the students are experts they are engineers. So you or me or Nazmi, we're not experts on building bridges. So our instructions, I don't know. Mice, are you an expert on building a bridge, Mice?
No, I am.
No, you're not. You're the same as me and Nazmi. We're not experts. So we can't give instructions on how to build a bridge. But what can we do while the student engineers are talking together about how to use the material? What are we experts in? What's our job? Well, let me choose one of you. What can we do? Rachad, are you with us? Can you tell us what we can do while the students are talking together in their little groups? What's our job as a teacher?
Maybe you can help them in their language.
Good. That's our job. Yes, we are language teachers. Okay, but in a task-based lesson, do you think that we will immediately be helping them, or could we also be doing something extra? What else could we do? We could help them instantly, like Rachad says, with corrective feedback. What else could we do? Let me choose another one of you. It's good to see lots of students today. Thank you for coming. Hala, can you think of something else that we could do? So Rachad said we could correct them on the spot. That's good. Corrective feedback. What else could we do? ideas, Hala?
Maybe the teacher monitors the group from a distance without giving any comments and see the cooperation between students. And he led the comments for the end of the
Well,
task.
well done. Well done, Allah. Yeah, so Rachad, between you, Rachad and Allah, you have the two things that the teacher can do. Number one, like Rachad said, instant corrective feedback. Or number two, like Allah said, delayed corrective feedback. Okay, well done. So that delayed corrective feedback is after the task. Yeah, okay. And another way in task-based learning that the students can improve is that they can compare the last bullet point, they can compare their output with the output of experts. Okay, so for example, one of you said that students could write a report, yeah, and then they could compare their report, their output, with a report written by an expert. So they read a journal article, okay? And that's another thing that often happens in task-based learning, okay? The students compare their output with the output of experts. Okay, so we've talked about corrective feedback, and then we also talked about provision of time for planning is useful and how that could help students pay attention to form. And I know that I think it was Amal and Taqwa said that it's useful to give students time to think about what they want to say. Okay, provision of time for planning. And I think Ellis means, just like Amal and Taqwa said, that learners are forced to think about the gaps in their knowledge if they are given time to plan a task. So often, if we go back to the string and the tape and the ping pong ball and the paper and the elastic bands and the matches and the table, one thing a teacher could do is give the students the materials and say, build a bridge. That's one thing. Or the teacher can stand at the front of the class and show the materials to the students and say, later, I will give you the materials. So two approaches. Number one, put the students in groups and give them the materials. Approach number two, stand at the front of the class and show them the materials and say, in 30 minutes, I will give you the materials. The second is better than the first. Why? Nice.
Because when the teacher gives the students the materials in 30 minutes, she gives the students time to think about what they're going to do.
Fantastic answer. Good. So if that's why I show the learners the bridge building materials before I let them touch the materials. Because if they touch the materials, they immediately start to build the bridge. There is no talking. There is no listening. Okay? But as Mai says, if learners are forced to think about the gaps in their knowledge, then it will help them to concentrate on what they are, on the language that they plan to use. You know, I'm very impressed. This is very difficult, I think. This is the most difficult one of Ellis's principles. So you're doing really well, okay, to understand it. Okay, so let's go back again to my used to and would lesson, okay? As I've said, my lesson follows definition 2 of form. Form means graphic and phonetic instantiations, okay? So let's have a look at a different graphic instantiation. Ooh, so we've got 4 sentences here. I'll help if you like. If you wash the dishes, I'll dry. If you talk loudly, you'll wake the baby. I'll be so happy if I pass the exam. So these are all we're talking again about form as graphic instantiations. So here's a question. It's a grammar question. What form do these sentences have in common? Can you give a name to the form of these sentences? Anyone?
If condition.
First conditional. Yes, it's the first conditional. Good. Okay. So these are all exemplars of the first conditional. Here's a question. Does it make sense to teach the first conditional, all of these sentences together? Okay. Some people say it makes sense to teach language in terms of functions rather than graphic forms. So the first sentence is the function of offering help. So the first one, the function is offering. So we've got 3 more sentences here. What do you think? Don't shout out, just think for 1 minute. What do you think are the functions of sentence 2 and 3 and 4? So the first one is offering help. Second one, what's that? The third one, the fourth one. Can anybody identify the functions of any of these sentences? Let's look at number 3. What's the function of that sentence? So the form is first conditional. What's the function? If you talk loudly, you'll wake the baby. What's the function there? I would choose one of you. Raha, can you tell me the function there? If you talk loudly, you'll wake the baby. What's the
Maybe
function?
a warning.
Well done. So here we are expressing a warning. So number 1, we are offering to help. Number 3, we are expressing a warning. What about number 4? I'll be so happy if I pass the exam. What
He's
function?
being optimistic.
If you're expressing yes, that's nice. And what about number 2? Maybe that's the most difficult one. If you wash the dishes, I'll dry. What do you think is happening there? What do you think?
Cooperation.
Yeah, maybe.
Dividing tasks.
Dividing tasks. Yeah, cooperation. I was thinking of negotiating. Yeah, Like,
Offering help
excuse me?
or agree.
Yeah,
Offering help or agreement.
it's very similar to the first one, isn't it? It's like it's a type of offering help, but it's more like talking about if you do something unpleasant, I'll do something unpleasant. It's not negotiating. Okay. So we've got the first one, offering help. The second one, negotiating. The third one, giving a warning. The fourth one, expressing optimism. Okay. So when you are, if we go back to Ellis's definition of form, which is form equals graphic or phonetic instantiations, then we have another thing as teachers we have to think about. We teach forms, the first conditional, or do we teach functions? So, for example, as I said, these are all exemplars of the first conditional, but does it make sense to teach the first conditional altogether? Some people say it makes sense to teach language in terms of functions rather than graphic forms. So let's have a look. So let's have a think. Imagine you want to teach the function of giving advice. Giving advice. Can you think of exemplars for giving advice? Think of ways you can give advice. For example.
Maybe if you take the medicine, you will feel better.
Maybe. Good. So you've used the first conditional there. Who said that? Excuse me.
Allah.
Allah. Thank you, Allah. So you use the first conditional. If you da da da, you will da da da. Give me another way to give some advice. Anyone? Anyone?
Yes.
Oh, just a second. I'm sorry. I'm trying to see who has their hand up. Just a second. I'm sorry. Rachad.
If you didn't study, you will fail. That's a warning.
Good. So you've used a conditional, but this time you've used a second conditional. Good. Another example, Tahwa.
Follow your study regularly in order to succeed.
Okay, good. Another one, Allah, Amna.
You should study well to get high marks.
Good. Keep it simple. You should. You should. Well done. Another one. Anyone else? Okay. Well, there are lots of exemplars of ways to give advice. Yeah. So here I've got a list. You should. You'd better. When that happened to me, I did this. If I were you, I would. You ought to do it. You might want to consider, if I were in your shoes, I might. Why don't you? You could. You'd be crazy to. Okay. So how many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Plus your ideas, 12, 13, 14. So there are lots of ways to give advice. Okay. So as a teacher, selection isn't easy. As a teacher, you need to make a choice. Do you choose? Which of these would you choose if you want to teach the function of giving advice? Which of these would you choose for your students? Any ideas?
Maybe when that happened to me, I did this. Because
Okay.
I talk about a situation, a real situation happened to me.
Okay, that's nice. Personalizing it, yeah. Any other ideas? I guess. Personalization is nice. But sometimes sometimes something which is frequent is not, it could be something which is also difficult. Okay, so it depends a lot on the level of your students. Okay, so if they are low-level students, which ones, if they are just beginning in English, which ones would you choose? Which ones are the easy ones?
Actually, for me, I will use, if I were you, I would. Because students often trust in teacher instruction.
Yeah, I understand. But was that Allah or Amina?
Amina.
Amina, would you teach this construction to low-level learners or only to high-level learners, Amina?
I think for high-level learners.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about low-level learners, Amina? Which ones would you teach them if they have only been studying English for 1 year and you want to teach them how to give advice?
Actually, I will use simple and direct way, like you might want to, or you could do.
Okay. Hala,
like simple and
Hala, what do you think?
I guess do it is the best one because you don't have to make a sentence, just do it.
Okay, so this is very interesting. Amna said maybe you might want to consider, and Hala said do it. Any other ideas? Nice.
I think I would use you should, because when we were beginners, we told that should is a model used to advise.
So it's interesting. We have 3 different opinions. Very interesting. And of course, we are not mathematics teachers, so there is not right or wrong here. Okay. But let's have a look. If you teach do it, is there a problem? Potentially? Is there a possible problem? Anyone? Well, it could be you need to be careful when you use it. So you can use it when you're talking to your brother, but maybe you cannot use it when you are talking to Nazmi, yeah? Because there's a question of what we call register and formality. Let's have a look at another one. If you might want to consider, what's a problem with that one?
I guess it's for high-level learners.
Yeah, maybe it's quite a difficult one, isn't it? Yeah, okay. But it's complicated because sometimes if we look at the bottom, to complicate things still further, some students actually liked to master something that is too difficult. Okay, so they might like to outperform their competence. Oh, what does that mean? It's nice for low-level learners to outperform their competence. What could that mean? That's a really difficult phrase, but maybe you can remember my lesson with Lupo Alberto. You remember the Italian fox who thinks he's a wolf, and he learned how to say, I learned how to say, Reggiti si vola in Italian. Does anybody remember from 4 weeks ago? What does that mean in English? Reggiti si vola. Anyone remember?
Yes, I remember.
Takwa, yeah?
Who stole the carrot?
No, it doesn't. But you remember the story but you don't remember the meaning of the phrase. Don't worry, Takwa, I'm not teaching you any Italian. No, it means hold on tight, we're flying, Takwa. It means hold on tight, we're flying. Now, when I was learning Italian, I was very happy. My Italian was terrible. I was a beginner, but I was very happy to learn Reggiti si vola, because I like to use these complicated, this complicated functional language. Even though it was too difficult for me, I like to use it. So I liked to outperform my competence. That means I like to do something which was too difficult for me. So I think maybe, who was it who chose, you might want to consider, maybe it was Hala who said, I would choose, you might want to consider. And yes, maybe.
No, I said do it.
Oh, did you, Hala? I'm sorry. It was somebody else who said you might want to consider. Okay. And yeah, even for beginners, it's sometimes nice to learn complicated language to outperform their competence. Okay. So we're nearly at the end of the lesson, but let me ask you a question. How do you prefer to learn forms? Do you prefer to learn, for example, all of the first conditionals together? Or would you prefer to learn lots of ways to do one function together? Do you have a preference? There's not a correct answer here. Each person could be different. Do you have a preference when you are learning? Do you prefer to learn functions altogether? For example, giving advice? Or do you prefer to learn forms altogether? For example, the first conditional. Does anybody have a preference?
I think learn more one function, more than one way for a function. For example, because it make your knowledge wider and it give you a chance to talk more and have more choices.
Yeah, maybe. Is this Ala or Amana?
Ala.
Ala, yeah. Maybe it is a little more useful in communicating if you have the functions ready. But some people have a different learning style, and they like to learn all of the forms together and then adapt them to the situation. So we're all different. And of course, you can mix. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Now we've nearly finished the lesson, but if we go back a few weeks, okay, I'm asking you to try to remember some things we studied in the past. So this is Ellis's, let's compare Ellis's principles 2 and principle 3, okay? So in principle 2, Ellis says, instruction needs to ensure that learners focus predominantly on meaning. That's principle 2. We saw that in the past, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Let's compare it to principle 3, which we studied today. Instruction needs to ensure that learners also focus on form. So here's my question at the bottom. Which does Ellis seem to think is more important? Getting students to focus on meaning or on form? Takwa, you have your hand up.
I think both, but meaning more.
Why do you, I agree. Ellis seems to think that maybe meaning is a bit more important. Why did you choose meaning, Taqwa?
Because in principle 3, he say also focus on form.
Good. And in principle 2, what does he say?
Focus
One
on
word.
meaning.
Yeah, but one word tells us that he thinks meaning is more important. Which word in principle 2?
Predominantly.
Well done, Taqwa. Yes, predominantly means 60%, 70%. Yeah. But then you're right, Taqwa. Your answer was perfect. He thinks they're both important, but maybe meaning is a little bit more important for Ellis. Okay. Well, you've been really good students today. This was the most complicated lesson. And as I told you, sometimes I find it, the crossovers between meaning and form can be difficult, okay? But remember, in our short course together, we are trying to find out a little bit about the underlying theories behind language learning in the classroom. Maybe it's not necessary to have exact answers to these questions, but it's interesting to try to think about them and to see what the experts are saying. And I'm not worried. Okay, for me, Ellis's principle number 3 is the most uncertain. But we shouldn't worry for 2 reasons. One, we shouldn't worry because language theorists who are more experienced and more knowledgeable than you and me and Nazmi, they all have different ideas. Okay, we've seen in the last 6 weeks lots of different ideas, especially lots of different ideas about form and meaning. And the second reason why we shouldn't worry is we can ask Professor Ellis to explain when we meet him in a couple of weeks' time. So now, before I talk about meeting Professor Ellis, I will give you your homework. And this week, I'm sorry, but I'm giving you 2 of Ellis's principles to read, okay? They are not long like this week's, okay? I think they are easier, but there are 2. So for next week, please read 2 of Ellis's principles. Number 1 is principle 6, the importance of input. And you have 2 questions to answer. First, Krashen says that only 2 things are necessary for language acquisition. What are they? Second question, in what 2 ways can teachers help learners get this input? So that's your first reading, is principle 6. Your second homework, please also read principle 7, the importance of output. And Ellis says that Skian gives 7 contributions that output can make. And in my opinion, the 7 contributions all make sense, except for 1. Okay, I think one of these 7 contributions, I don't understand it. So let's see if you have the same problem. Okay? That's your homework for next week. Okay. So the 2 pieces of news that I gave you last week. Number 1, we would like to do a combined lesson with my students. And number 2, Professor Ellis would like to meet you. Okay? So, and these are the timings that we are proposing. So, number 1, the joint lesson with my, excuse me, The joint lesson with my students will be on Tuesday, the 10th of December, from 4 to 6 p.m. Jerusalem time. And that is definitely organized. My students know about this. And the second lesson will be the last lesson on our course. We will meet Professor Ellis on Friday, the 20th of December, from 9 to 10:30 in the morning, Jerusalem time. That's the last lesson of the course. So what questions do you have for me? If you have any questions, please ask me. Nazmi.
Thank you, Will, for this very interesting and challenging session. As you said, this topic is very challenging to first-year students.
Fantastic, fantastic first-year students.
Yeah. Let me just give a comment on timing or a piece of advice to my students on this timing. We have no choice, me and Bill and the students and Alice, for changing these two times. So please take it as fixed. Because if you look at the time difference between Gaza, UK, and New Zealand, big differences in time. 10 hours difference between Gaza and New Zealand, and 12 hours between the UK and the New Zealand. So it's morning in New Zealand means 8 o'clock in the evening, or vice versa in the UK. New Zealand in the east, it's the sun rises first, so they are ahead of us of time. So no choice about no alternatives to these timings. My advice to you is there are only two times, two sessions. So, and we want to crown this course by these two sessions. And we would like to do your best to attend and encourage all your colleagues also to attend for several reasons. One, these are very important. It's like the cream or a crema on the top of a cake. Okay, so it's vital for all of you to attend, and it's a good opportunity for you to communicate with your colleagues in Northumbria University, and also with the top, one of the top professors in language acquisition and language learning, Professor Ellis. It's an honor and a privilege for all of us to listen to him and to meet him. For these reasons, I would advise you to take all the precautions that you are familiar with and unfamiliar with to save energy on your mobile and your laptop. Just keep them charged for these two sessions, fully charged. Second, use on that day or these days or nights, one of them in the morning and one in the afternoon or almost evening. Use all the settings on your mobile to serve energy. So instead of serving 4 hours, it can serve you 20 hours if you learn how to do that. You can discuss this if you like on the group. If somebody doesn't know, he can or she can ask how the settings, how to do this. Use the mobiles maybe if your brothers or sisters or mothers. For other things, and keep yours fully charged. we have no choice in Palestine but to work hard as such, and to face and overcome the challenges we face. It's not our choice to live like this, it's our destiny, and we will try to overcome all the challenges. And with a strong will, determination, resilience, patience, taking actions, precautions, planning from now, inshallah, we will succeed. Not only to succeed, I always ask you not to succeed. We don't ask for success as brilliant Palestinians, but I always ask for excellence, to excel rather than just to pass or success. This is what we want, and for this, and there will be prizes for you at the end of this course. Hopefully, we can give you some prizes for you. We're trying our best to do this if we can, inshallah. So I hope that all of you add these sessions on your agenda, prepare them for well, prepare well for them, for both. Prepare your tool, your laptop or your mobile. Prepare your questions, prepare your comments, etc. And we'll let you know next time maybe of what to do for each session.
Yes.
So we come not prepared to these sessions, fully prepared, not prepared, fully prepared. Okay, sorry, I'm taking a bit of your time, but this is essential and vital to mobilize you and motivate you and encourage you for working very hard with Bill, and Bill has been working very hard to invite Rod Ellis to give a session on to Gaza, and we want to show Rod Ellis and the international students and the students in Northumbria how Gaza students are distinguished, how they perform outstandingly, how you are brilliant and very resilient students. Let's show them through education, we ignite light to shine in the whole world for the sake of Palestine.
Thank you, Nazmi. Just before I go, can I ask a question? How many more lessons do we have? Who can tell me?
3.
Good. We have one lesson next Friday, the normal Friday lesson. And then we have a lesson on Tuesday, the 10th of December from 4 to 6. And the last lesson, Friday, the 20th of December from 9 in the morning. So thank you. We have 3 more lessons. I hope that's okay for you all. And I will see you next Friday. And Nazmi, I think we need to talk about the timing next Friday, but probably the normal time, but we can decide.